everybody, hi every spirit, welcome very much to the channel. We are here today to talk about what's happening in the industry or in multiple industries of movies, video games and art in general. Because if you're spiritual, you know that there are basically two sides when it comes to creativity and then business. We have the gold mines, the creative ones, and then you have the cobalt mines, the ones that are actually able to make business out of it. And we need both, because a lot of times artists and creative people, they lack the reality, they lack the logic, they lack the limits and boundaries, and sometimes they lack self-value. They are not able to value their work or their product in the right way. That's why that's why it's so easy, or it's so common to have even like football players, right? Sports people, to have agents, to agent their product, the creative people, the one that's actually doing the performance, the person that's actually doing something. And then you have the agent or the manager, not as in the coach, but the manager of the career for the singers, for the artists, even for professional esports players, right? So it's always natural, and it's a symbiotic relationship between the creator and the manager, or the businessman, the seller, the one that gets the contacts and the contracts, right? But what happened in, I would say, I don't know when it happened, but when we started to see the effects of what I'm about to say, it was like around the year 2000. We still had some good shows or better music than nowadays, I mean. But we started to see a decay a bit later, closer to 2010, in the quality of movies, music, animation, and now it's even, I think we hit the lowest when it comes to music quality, movies quality. We still have some saving graces. For example, I didn't watch the Sonic movies, but I see a lot of comments saying they're just doing creative stuff and they are pleasing the fans. And we have anime from Japan being, I think, the best form of entertainment right now, or not the best because that's very subjective, but the most creative. For example, I recently watched the Fallout show and it was pretty good. It wasn't weird at all, right? But why, or mostly, what was the biggest reason why we started, spiritually speaking, by the way, that we started to see a decay and a downfall of the creativity? It's because the cobalt mines, the businessmen, the middlemen, which is not wrong, there is nothing wrong with them. What is wrong, or what was wrong, is the fact that they took over. They stopped being the middleman and they wanted to be the main man. And we can see that when there is a lot of wokeism, or no, I don't like that term, but when they try to force something into a creative art. For an example, Lord of the Rings, and then they take Lord of the Rings lore and they change it to fit a specific narrative, to, in their perspective, have better sales, to please certain demographics. So they're taking the creativity away to replace it, I mean, with a business practice, with a business model. And then you totally see a failure of those shows and those movies. You know what I'm saying? And that's ultimately the reason why we have worst, not all shows are worst, but in general, and music as well, and entertainment in general, it's worse right now, because first we are in the shift, right? We are in a total transition period, and the industry is miles away from what the people want/need right now when it comes to entertainment. But because the middleman, the businessman, the cobalt mine took over, or took a bigger role than they should, they are still using the old guidelines, they are still using the old models to try and make a profit. And I think, at least for me, the biggest example, not the biggest, but the most clear example is video games. Because the movie industry was already big, right, when I began to be more aware of myself and my surroundings. But the video game industry, I experienced the growth, I experienced the video game industry, I mean, reaching a peak. And also, in a lot of companies, we are now seeing a lot of scumminess, right? EA, Ubisoft, and sometimes it's not being scummy, they just don't know better because they got successful in the old ways, in the old world. Because every time we refer to the end of the world, it's not the physical world, it's the spiritual world, and then we see a change and a transformation. And those companies fell behind and still are falling behind, right? And then you have other companies, smaller companies, making great games. And this has been the case for at least 3 years. Like, not once in a while, but consistently, we see smaller developers in these studios, right? Getting better results in terms of the product itself and sales than these big companies that invest thousands, not thousands, millions and millions of dollars. And then you have like Warhorse, a company that made one of my favorite games of all time that came out earlier this year, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. They had a small team, small budget, and they made one of the best games ever. Not of the year, not of the decade, ever. Right? Because what? They had creativity. Because they didn't stick to the old world. They just did what they had to do with the resource that they had, and they did the current wave. They used the current times. They weren't stuck with old tactics to try and make a quick buck or squeeze the most money out of their clients, right? And that's a great show. I think right now the best example of how the old world is failing is the video game industry, right? We have a lot of more creative, less industrialized studios making a lot of money and being super, super successful. And I think it just really shows that creativity, spirituality always wins. Even when it doesn't look like it, even when it looks there is no gain, there is no money, there is no profit being made, it is. Spirit will always win because spirit creates everything else. And sometimes reality takes over, the star gets inverted, but it does not take long until the spirit creates something else that reality that took over, it just can't exist anymore. It just doesn't work anymore. Because spirit is always creating. Spirit is the creator. You are the creator, not the creation. So the creation can never overstep and overimpose itself over the creator. So creating activity will always win, would always spread further than creating inactivity, than creating stillness. So the old world, when it comes to the entertainment business, is already over. Yes, a lot of people still buy FIFA or EAFC, for an example, but it's already known that it sucks. It's already known that EA is super scummy. A lot of people stop buying, but that's a bit different because it's not just the game itself, it's they're making a buck out of the sport, out of people being immersed in the world of soccer, in the world of football, right? So that's a bit different because it's not just the game itself, right? It's not just the EA itself, it's like the sport as well, which is a huge culture, right? Fellow Americans, soccer is way bigger than you might think, right? But yeah, that's also a good example because some people might be like, oh, but what about this game, this sports game? They still sell a lot. But actually, I just thought about this. Pokemon is the biggest entertainment franchise ever, the biggest IP, and they are really in a transitional period. They are kind of stuck in the fence where they had a formula that worked very well, and they made some bad products in terms of its quality and its being polished. It just wasn't polished at all, but they still sold a lot. It's true, but they understood that it wouldn't last for long. They understood that that formula or not being creative wouldn't last for long. So they started innovating with Pokemon Legends Arceus, if you know, you know, and now with Pokemon Legends ZA as well, that will be coming out later this year. They are innovating, but the thing is, always remember something. The buyer or the client, aka the mass, the people, they have the most power. And in the specific case about Pokemon, just also to give another perspective about this, it's that sometimes companies cannot be creative because their audience is expecting the formula. So because nothing is always black and white. There is a gray hue always about things, right? So what happened is, in my perspective, if you know about Pokemon, you know about Pokemon Black and White, which is the 5th generation of Pokemon, released in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And what happened is they took a super creative approach. Because, you know, there was 151 original Pokemon, and in Pokemon Black and White, there was none but original Pokemon. There was no repetition of older Pokemon, no nostalgia bait, completely new Pokédex, so aka the collection of Pokemon, new characters, a new approach to storytelling, even new forms of battle were added to the game. And right now, they are one of the most loved games. I love them personally. But at the time they were created and released, there was so much hate. I wasn't really aware of it because living in Portugal at the time and in my sphere wasn't very technological. I only had 1, 2, maybe 3 friends that cared about Pokemon, and in general, you wouldn't be exposed to like Pokemon news or gaming news, right? But now seeing comments of people reacting to how things were back in the day, it's clear that the audience rejected the creativity. And that's my point, is that sometimes the companies realize like Pokemon already was creative. And sometimes people criticize certain companies, oh, you're not being creative, you're always doing the same stuff, you're always repeating the formula, because first, it works, it makes their money, and then, in the case of Pokemon, for example, they tried, they were hella creative, and they received backlash in that specific time, around 2012, then with Pokemon Black and White 2 as well, 2 years later, they also, I think Pokemon Black and White is from the main series of Pokemon the least sold. You know what I'm saying? So it's still, to this day, right? So it really shows that sometimes people or the masses are more comfortable with the lack of creativity, with the cobalt minds taking over. But I think now, more than ever, since like 2 years ago, until today, until the future right now, it will be completely the other way around. People want more creativity, people want more innovation. I even heard somebody saying that right now, for an anime to be successful, it needs to be weird. It needs to be different. Of course, it's fucking Age of Aquarius, brother. Pluto's in Aquarius right now. Saturn was already through Aquarius, you know what I'm saying? So, yes, it is true. And if you think about it, in a completely different note, just to end the video quickly, the big 3 anime, One Piece, manga, Bleach, and Naruto, they were already weird, right? The main character of One Piece is a rubber dude. Bleach is about shinigamis, people that help spirits transit to another era, to another age, to another space, I mean. And then Naruto is about a ninja that has a sealed fox inside him in very broad way. So that's already weird enough, you know what I'm saying? So people are now like saying, oh, animes don't need to be weird. No. Those became the best / bigger animes because they were already weird, because creativity was already at place. And that's a show that we are changing into a world where creativity is more requested than ever. Thank you for watching. Your support is greatly appreciated. I wish you the best thoughts, ideas, feelings, and emotions. A whole bunch of individuality, creativity, and responsibility as well. And I see you on the next one.